The noose was already knotted and hanging from the old oak tree when Jessica Turner first understood that justice in Del Rio, Texas, would not find her without a fight. She stood in the stifling July heat of 1882, her wrists bound with rough rope that bit into her skin, watching the crowd gather with hungry eyes that wanted blood more than truth. The sheriff had dragged her from her small room above the general store 3 hours earlier, accusing her of stealing $2,000 from the Del Rio bank. And now, half the town had assembled to see her hang before sundown. Jessica's dark auburn hair clung to her damp neck as she tried to steady her breathing. 23 years old, alone in this frontier town for only 8 months, she had no family to speak for her character and no powerful friends to vouch for her innocence. She had come to Del Rio after her father died of pneumonia back in Missouri, seeking a fresh start as a seamstress. The work was honest and kept her fed, but it also kept her isolated. Most of the women in town viewed her with suspicion, a young, unmarried woman living alone, while the men either leered or ignored her entirely. "This is a mistake," she said for what felt like the 100th time, her voice cracking despite her determination to stay strong. "I did not steal that money. I have never even been inside the bank." Sheriff Marcus Hendricks, a broad man with a thick gray mustache and cold eyes, shook his head. "The evidence says different, Miss Turner. Bank manager found your handkerchief right there on his desk, and the lock on the safe was picked clean. You were seen near the bank that evening. I walk past the bank every day on my way to the boarding house for supper," Jessica protested. "And I lost that handkerchief weeks ago." "Anyone could have picked it up," the crowd murmured, but not with sympathy. She could see it in their faces. They had already decided her guilt. In a town like Del Rio, where cattle thieves and bandits created constant fear, people wanted swift justice. They wanted to believe the crime was solved so they could sleep easier at night. That was when he rode into town. Yates Sullivan sat tall in his saddle, a man carved from sun and leather and hard years on the range. At 27, he had the kind of face that made people take notice. Strong jaw shadowed with stubble, blue eyes that seemed to see through pretense, and a quiet confidence that came from a man comfortable with who he was. He wore dusty trail clothes and a worn hat pulled low against the brutal Texas sun. His horse, a sturdy gray gelding named Ash, moved with the easy gait of an animal well cared for. Yates had been driving cattle north for the last 3 months, part of a crew moving longhorns to Kansas. The work was brutal and the pay modest, but he preferred the honesty of it to the schemes and corruption he had witnessed in other lines of work. He had stopped in Del Rio only to resupply before heading to his brother's ranch 50 miles west. The last thing he expected was to ride into the middle of a hanging. The crowd parted slightly as he guided Ash toward the center of town. Yates took in the scene with the practiced assessment of a man who had seen both justice and its ugly counterfeit. The girl standing beneath the oak tree looked terrified but defiant, her chin raised even as tears streaked her dusty cheeks. The sheriff looked too eager, and the crowd too bloodthirsty. Something about the whole situation felt wrong. "Hold on there," Yates called out, his voice carrying easily over the muttering crowd. "What is the crime here?" Sheriff Hendricks turned, his expression annoyed at the interruption. "Bank robbery. $2,000 stolen 3 nights ago. The evidence points to this woman, and frontier justice says she hangs for it." Yates swung down from his saddle, his boots hitting the packed dirt with a solid thud. "Evidence? What evidence exactly?" "That is none of your concern, Drifter," Hendricks said sharply. "This is town business." "Justice should be everybody's business," Yates replied evenly. He walked closer, ignoring the hostile stares from several men in the crowd. "And I am curious what kind of evidence condemns a woman to hang without a proper trial. We do not need some outsider telling us how to handle our affairs," a man shouted from the crowd. Others voiced their agreement. Yates stopped a few feet from where Jessica stood. Up close, he could see the raw fear in her eyes, but also something else. The desperate hope that someone, anyone, might actually listen to her. Their gazes met for a brief moment, and something passed between them, a recognition that defied explanation. "My name is Yates Sullivan," he said, speaking to the sheriff but keeping his attention partially on Jessica. "I worked as a deputy in Abilene for 2 years before I took up cattle driving. I have seen enough false accusations to know they smell a certain way, and this whole situation reeks of it." "A former deputy," Sheriff Hendricks scoffed. "That does not give you authority here." "No," Yates agreed, "but common sense should give everyone here pause. You are about to hang a woman based on what? A handkerchief and the fact that she walked past a building." "There are witnesses," Hendricks insisted. "Then let us hear from them," Yates said. "Right now. Before you make a mistake you cannot undo." The sheriff's jaw tightened, but the murmuring in the crowd had changed tone. A few people looked uncertain now, shifting their weight and exchanging glances. The suggestion of a mistake, spoken by someone who claimed law experience, had planted a seed of doubt. "Fine," Hendricks finally said. "Samuel Pierce saw her near the bank that evening, acting suspicious." An older man stepped forward from the crowd, his face weathered and his eyes rheumy. "That is right. I saw her lurking around the bank just after sunset." Yates turned to face him. "Lurking, or walking past on her way somewhere?" "Well, she was walking, but slow-like," Samuel said, his certainty wavering slightly. "And did you see her enter the bank?" Yates pressed. "No, but did you see her with any tools that might pick a lock? Did you see her carrying anything that could hold $2,000? Samuel's face reddened. "I saw her near the bank, and that is suspicious enough." "Suspicious is not the same as guilty," Yates said firmly. He turned back to the sheriff. "What else do you have?" Hendricks pulled a delicate handkerchief from his pocket, edged with simple lace. "This was found on the bank manager's desk, right next to the safe. It has her initials." Yates took the handkerchief and examined it. The initials JT were indeed embroidered in one corner. "Miss Turner, is this yours?" Jessica nodded quickly. "It was. I lost it over a month ago. I thought it had fallen out of my pocket in the street. I looked for it but never found it." "Did anyone else know about this handkerchief?" Yates asked. "I suppose anyone who saw me with it," Jessica said. "I used to carry it to church on Sundays." Yates held up the fabric for the crowd to see. "So we have a handkerchief that went missing over a month ago, showing up conveniently at the scene of a crime. Does that not strike anyone as peculiar? If you were going to rob a bank, would you leave behind something with your initials on it?" The crowd was quieter now. Several people looked thoughtful rather than angry. "Maybe she dropped it by accident," someone suggested. "Or maybe someone planted it there to frame her," Yates countered. He turned back to Hendricks. "Who discovered the theft?" "Bank manager Charles Whitmore," the sheriff said. "He opened the safe yesterday morning and found the money gone. The lock had been picked sometime during the night." "I would like to speak with him," Yates said. "This is highly irregular," Hendricks protested. "So is hanging an innocent woman," Yates shot back. "You want justice or just a show?" The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Finally, a voice from the crowd called out, "Let him ask his questions, Marcus. No harm in being thorough." Other voices joined in agreement. The bloodlust had cooled enough for reason to creep in. Sheriff Hendricks looked frustrated but gave a curt nod. "Someone fetch Charles." While they waited, Yates moved closer to Jessica. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. She shook her head, though her eyes were still wide with fear. Why are you helping me? You do not even know me. I know innocent when I see it, Yates said simply. And I know a railroad job when I smell one. Someone set you up, and I aim to find out who. Thank you, Jessica whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I thought I was going to die. Not today, Yates promised, and the conviction in his voice sent a strange warmth through her chest despite the dire circumstances. Charles Whitmore arrived moments later, a thin man in his 40s with spectacles perched on his narrow nose. He looked nervous, his eyes darting around the crowd before settling on the sheriff. Charles, this man has some questions about the robbery, Hendricks said with barely concealed irritation. Yates studied the bank manager carefully. Mr. Whitmore, when exactly did you discover the money was missing? Yesterday morning, like I told the sheriff, Charles said. I came in to open the bank and found the safe had been broken into. And the handkerchief was on your desk. Yes, right there in plain sight. Did you notice anything else unusual? Any signs of forced entry to the building? Charles hesitated. Well, no. The front door was still locked when I arrived. I had to use my key. So someone picked the lock to get in, picked the safe lock, stole $2,000, left a handkerchief behind, and then picked the front door lock again on the way out to relock it. Yates laid out the sequence slowly, letting each improbability sink in. Does that sound reasonable to you? Charles shifted his weight. I suppose it does seem strange when you put it that way. Who else has keys to the bank? Yates asked. Just me and the owner, Mr. Gregory. And where is Mr. Gregory? He travels frequently for business, Charles said. He has been in San Antonio for the past 2 weeks. Yates nodded slowly, pieces of a puzzle forming in his mind. Who else works at the bank? Just me. It is a small operation. So you are the only one who handles the money on a daily basis, Yates observed. The only one who knows exactly when large sums are in the safe. Charles's face paled slightly. Now wait just a minute, if you are suggesting. I am not suggesting anything yet, Yates said calmly. I am just gathering facts. When was the last time you saw that much cash in the safe? A cattle buyer made a deposit 3 days ago, Charles admitted, but I logged it properly in the books. Can I see those books? The sheriff interrupted. This has gone far enough. You are not a lawman here, Sullivan. Then act like one yourself, Yates said sharply. You were about to hang a woman on the flimsiest evidence I have ever seen. If you have any integrity at all, you will let me finish asking questions before someone dies for a crime they did not commit. The two men locked eyes. Finally, Hendricks looked away first. Fine, but make it quick. They moved to the bank, a small wooden building with barred windows. Inside, the air was cooler but musty. Charles retrieved a leather-bound ledger from beneath the counter and laid it open on the desk. Yates examined the entries, noting the deposit from 3 days prior. The handwriting was neat and precise. Everything looks in order here, Yates said, but that does not tell us much. He walked around the small space, examining the floor, the walls, the safe itself. The safe door bore faint scratches around the lock, consistent with picking. But something else caught his attention. Fresh scratches on the wooden floorboards near the back wall. What is back there? Yates asked, pointing. Just a storage closet, Charles said. We keep old records and supplies. Yates opened the closet door and found exactly what Charles described. Shelves lined with papers and boxes. But the dust on the floor had been disturbed recently, and there were scuff marks suggesting something heavy had been moved. He pulled aside a stack of boxes and found a loose floorboard. Prying it up revealed a cavity beneath, and inside that cavity was a cloth sack. He pulled it out and opened it. Gold coins glinted in the dim light, quite a lot of them. Well now, Yates said quietly, That is interesting. Charles had gone completely white. I do not know how that got there. Someone must have planted it. Funny, Yates said, turning to face the bank manager. That is exactly what Miss Turner has been saying about the handkerchief. He hefted the sack, estimating its weight. I would guess this is close to $2,000 worth. Want to tell me the truth now, Mr. Whitmore? Or should we keep playing this game? The sheriff moved to block the door, his hand on his gun. Charles looked like a trapped animal. This is not what it looks like. It looks like you stole money from your own bank, tried to frame an innocent woman for it, and hid the cash until things cooled down, Yates said flatly. That is what it looks like. I needed that money, Charles burst out suddenly. I have gambling debts. Men in San Antonio who will kill me if I do not pay. I thought I could borrow it, pay them, and then find a way to put it back before the owner returned. But then I panicked when I realized someone might notice. I needed a scapegoat, and she was perfect. No family, no friends, no one to defend her. The confession spilled out like poison from a lanced wound. Jessica, who had been brought to the bank with several townspeople crowding behind her, felt her knees nearly buckle with relief. She had been so close to death, so terrifyingly close, and this man had been willing to murder her to save his own skin. You bastard, Sheriff Hendricks breathed. You were going to let us hang her. I did not have a choice, Charles said desperately. They would have killed me. So you decided she should die instead, Yates said, his voice cold with disgust. That is the choice of a coward. The sheriff arrested Charles Whitmore on the spot, clapping him in irons while the crowd watched in stunned silence. Jessica stood trembling, the reality of her near death slowly sinking in. She watched Yates through a haze of shock and gratitude, this stranger who had ridden into her life at exactly the right moment and saved it. When the crowd finally dispersed, muttering about the shocking turn of events, Yates approached Jessica where she sat on the bank steps. Someone had untied her wrists, and she was rubbing the raw skin absently. You should have those looked at, Yates said, gesturing to her wrists. Jessica looked up at him, and for the first time she really saw him. The kind eyes beneath the weathered exterior, the strength tempered with gentleness. You saved my life, she said simply. How can I ever thank you? No thanks needed, Yates replied. I just did what was right. Most people in that crowd did not seem to think so, Jessica said bitterly. They were ready to watch me hang. Fear makes people cruel, Yates said, sitting down beside her. They wanted someone to blame, and you were convenient. That does not make it right, but it makes it human. They sat in silence for a moment, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the dusty street. Jessica felt something shift inside her, a loosening of the tight fear that had gripped her for months in this town. This man beside her, this stranger, had seen her when everyone else had looked away. He had believed in her innocence when even she was starting to doubt anyone would. Where will you go now? Yates asked. Jessica had not thought that far ahead. I suppose I will go back to my room. Back to my sewing, though I doubt anyone in this town will ever trust me again after this. They should be ashamed, Yates said firmly. You are the wronged party here. Maybe, Jessica said, but shame does not pay for dresses to mend or food to eat. I will manage, though, I always do. Yates looked at her, taking in the set of her jaw and the resilience in her eyes despite everything she had just endured. He found himself admiring her strength and something else too, something he could not quite name yet. You are tough, he observed. I have had to be, Jessica replied. She turned to face him directly. What about you? Where were you headed before you stopped to save my life? My brother's ranch west of here, Yates said. I have been on a cattle drive for 3 months, figured I would visit him before taking on another job. Then I have delayed you, Jessica said. You should go. I have taken enough of your time. But Yates found he was in no hurry to leave. The ranch would still be there tomorrow, and something about this woman made him want to stay. "No delay," he said. "Besides, I should make sure you are truly all right. That was a traumatic experience." "I am stronger than I look," Jessica assured him, though her voice wavered slightly. "I can see that," Yates said gently, "but even strong people need help sometimes." They talked for another hour as the sun sank lower in the sky, painting the Texas landscape in shades of orange and gold. Jessica told him about her father's death, her journey to Del Rio, the loneliness of trying to build a life in a place where she had no connections. Yates told her about his years as a deputy, his decision to leave that life behind for the simpler work of cattle driving, his complicated relationship with his brother, who had settled into ranching while Yates remained restless. By the time they parted ways, with Yates promising to check on her the next day, something had been planted between them. Neither could have named it yet, but it was there, a seed of connection, of possibility. True to his word, Yates appeared at the boarding house the following morning. Jessica had spent a sleepless night replaying the horror of the previous day and the miracle of her rescue. When she saw him riding up the street, her heart lifted in a way that surprised her. "Good morning," Yates said, tipping his hat. "I thought you might like some company for breakfast." "My treat, to make up for this town's terrible hospitality." Jessica smiled, the first genuine smile she had managed in days. "I would like that very much." They ate at a small restaurant, enduring the stares and whispers of other patrons. Jessica held her head high, refusing to show shame for a crime she had not committed. Yates admired her courage and made a point of treating her with obvious respect, his message to the town clear. Over eggs and biscuits, their conversation flowed easily. Jessica found herself laughing at Yates's stories from the trail, tales of stubborn cattle and cantankerous fellow cowboys. Yates found himself captivated by Jessica's wit and intelligence, the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about the books she loved to read, or the satisfaction of creating something beautiful with needle and thread. "Have you thought about leaving Del Rio?" Yates asked. "After what happened, I would not blame you for wanting a fresh start elsewhere." Jessica had thought about little else. "Where would I go? I have so little saved, barely enough to get me to another town, and then I would be starting over again with nothing." "My brother's ranch is always looking for help," Yates said, the idea forming as he spoke. "His wife died 2 years ago, and he has 3 children to care for while running the place. He could use someone good with a needle, someone to help with the house and the children. It would not be glamorous work, but it would be honest, and you would be treated fairly." Jessica studied him carefully. "Why are you doing this? You have already saved my life. You do not owe me anything more." "Maybe I like your company," Yates said honestly. "Maybe I want to see you somewhere you will be appreciated instead of suspected. Or maybe I just believe in helping people when I can." The offer was tempting, dangerously so, but Jessica had learned to be cautious. "I do not want charity." "It is not charity if you are working for wages," Yates pointed out. "My brother Thomas, he is a good man, fair. He would pay you what the work is worth, and you would have a safe place to live away from the whispers here." Jessica considered it. The thought of staying in Del Rio, facing the townspeople who had been so eager to see her hang, made her stomach turn. But leaving with a man she had only just met to go work for his brother was also risky. Still, what did she really have to lose? Her life here was already ruined. "I will think about it," she said finally. "That is all I ask," Yates replied. Over the next few days, Yates stayed in Del Rio, finding odd jobs to justify his presence but really remaining to spend time with Jessica. They took walks in the early evening when the worst heat had passed, talking about everything and nothing. Yates helped her carry fabric from the general store. Jessica mended a tear in his jacket, her fingers nimble and sure. With each interaction, the connection between them deepened. Jessica found herself thinking about him constantly. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle strength in his hands, the respect with which he treated her, as though her opinions and thoughts mattered. She had never experienced that before, not from the men in her life. Her father had loved her but kept her at a distance after her mother died. The men in Del Rio had either leered or ignored her. Yates saw her as a person, whole and valuable in her own right. Yates was equally captivated. Jessica's resilience in the face of injustice impressed him deeply. Her quick mind and sharper wit kept him on his toes in the best way. And there was something about her smile, rare but radiant when it appeared, that made his chest feel too tight. He had known women before, had even thought himself in love once or twice, but this felt different. This felt real in a way nothing else ever had. On the fifth evening, as they sat by the river that ran along the edge of town, Yates finally voiced what had been building between them. "Come with me to the ranch," he said. "Not just for the work, though that is a genuine offer. Come because I want you to, because I cannot stand the thought of leaving you here where people treat you like you did something wrong." Jessica's breath caught. "Yates, we have only known each other less than a week." "I know," he said, turning to face her fully. "And I know it is fast, maybe too fast. But I also know that I have never met anyone like you. I know that when I think about riding out of Del Rio without you, it feels wrong. I know that I want to see where this could go between us if you are willing." "This," Jessica whispered, though she knew exactly what he meant. "This feeling," Yates said, reaching out to gently take her hand. "This connection, I think you feel it too." Jessica did not deny it. She could not. "I do," she admitted, "but it scares me. Everything is happening so fast, and I have already had my world turned upside down once this week." "I understand," Yates said, "and I am not asking you to promise me anything except a chance. Come to the ranch, work for my brother, get to know me properly, and let me get to know you. If nothing comes of it, you will still have a safe place and honest work, but if something does come of it—" He trailed off, but his eyes said everything his words did not. Jessica looked down at their joined hands, his calloused and strong, hers smaller but marked with the needle pricks of her trade. Two people from different worlds, thrown together by circumstance and somehow fitting perfectly. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "All right," she said finally, "I will come with you." The smile that spread across Yates's face was brighter than the setting sun. "You will not regret it," he promised. "I hope not," Jessica said, smiling back despite her nervousness. They left Del Rio 3 days later, Jessica's few belongings packed on a mule Yates bought for the purpose. The town barely noticed their departure, too consumed with gossip about Charles Whitmore's trial and the scandal of a bank manager turned thief. Jessica felt a weight lift from her shoulders as Del Rio disappeared behind them, the flat Texas landscape stretching endlessly ahead. The journey to the Sullivan Ranch took 2 days of steady riding. Yates kept the pace easy, mindful that Jessica was not accustomed to long hours on horseback. They camped under the stars the first night, Yates respectfully keeping his bedroll on the opposite side of the fire while they talked into the darkness. Jessica found herself relaxing in ways she had not allowed herself to in years. The combination of Yates's steady presence and the open landscape soothing something deep inside her. "Tell me about your brother," Jessica said as they lay looking up at the vast canopy of stars. "Thomas is 4 years older than me," Yates said. "Always was the responsible one. He married young, had his children, bought the ranch, did everything right according to how we were raised." "And you are the wandering one," Jessica observed. "I suppose so," Yates admitted. I never could settle the way Thomas did. Always felt like there was something else out there, something I needed to find. Have you found it? Jessica asked softly. Yates turned his head to look at her across the dying firelight. Maybe, he said. Maybe I am starting to. The next day brought them to Sullivan Land. The ranch sprawled across good grazing territory, with a house that was larger than Jessica expected, and several outbuildings in various states of repair. Cattle dotted the distant hills, and a few horses grazed in a nearby corral. Thomas Sullivan came out to meet them, a man who looked like an older, more settled version of Yates. He had the same blue eyes but more lines around them, the same strong build but carrying more weight. 3 children tumbled out after him, 2 boys who looked to be about 8 and 6 and a little girl no more than 4. Yates, Thomas said, his voice warm despite his surprised expression. You said you were coming alone. Plans changed, Yates said, dismounting and helping Jessica down from her horse. Thomas, this is Jessica Turner. She is the woman I wrote you about, the one who was falsely accused in Del Rio. Jessica, my brother Thomas, and these rascals are my nephews Benjamin and Samuel, and my niece Eleanor. The children stared at Jessica with open curiosity. Thomas's expression was more guarded, but he extended his hand politely. Miss Turner, my brother mentioned your situation in his letter. Terrible business. It was, Jessica agreed, shaking his hand. But your brother saved my life. I am grateful beyond words. Jessica is a seamstress, Yates continued. I told her you could use someone to help with the house and children. She would earn her keep and then some. Thomas studied Jessica for a long moment, and she felt herself being assessed. Finally, he nodded. We could certainly use the help. The house has been falling apart since Mary died, and the children's clothes are more patches than original fabric at this point. If you are willing to work, you are welcome here. Relief flooded through Jessica. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. I promise I will earn my place. Just Thomas, he said. We do not stand on ceremony out here. The house interior revealed the truth of Thomas's words. It was clean but chaotic, with the unmistakable signs of a man trying to manage a household while also running a ranch. Dishes were stacked haphazardly, laundry piled in corners, and the children's rooms looked like a windstorm had passed through. I do what I can, Thomas said, sounding almost apologetic, but there are only so many hours in a day. I understand, Jessica said. Why do not you show me where things are, and I can start getting organized? Over the next week, Jessica threw herself into work. She scrubbed the house from top to bottom, organized the chaos, and began the enormous task of mending and creating clothes for 3 growing children. The work was exhausting but satisfying in ways her lonely sewing in Del Rio had never been. The children, initially shy, warmed to her quickly. Eleanor especially attached herself to Jessica, starving for feminine attention after 2 years without a mother. Yates stayed at the ranch, helping Thomas with the cattle and various repairs. But every evening, he found reasons to be near Jessica. He would help her carry water from the well, or sit with her on the porch after the children were in bed, talking until the stars came out. You are good with them, Yates observed one evening as they watched fireflies dance in the gathering darkness. The children, I mean, they have taken to you. They are sweet, Jessica said. They miss their mother terribly, but they are doing their best. So is Thomas, Yates said. He loved Mary deeply. Her death nearly broke him. Jessica nodded, thinking of the quiet sadness she sometimes saw in Thomas's eyes. It must be hard raising children alone while managing all this. That is why your help means so much, Yates said, and not just the practical help. The children need someone who cares about them, not just someone going through the motions. I do care about them, Jessica said honestly. They are good children. Yates reached over and took her hand, the gesture becoming familiar between them now. "I am glad you are here," he said simply. "So am I," Jessica replied, squeezing his hand gently. As summer deepened into August, the connection between Jessica and Yates grew stronger. They stole moments together whenever possible. Early morning walks before the day's work began, late evening conversations after everyone else had gone to bed. They talked about their pasts, their dreams, their fears. Jessica told Yates about the loneliness of her childhood after her mother died, the way her father had retreated into himself with grief. Yates told Jessica about the restlessness that had driven him from place to place, always searching for something he could never quite name. "I think I know what it was now," Yates said one evening as they sat by the creek that ran through Sullivan land. "What I was searching for, I mean." "What was it?" Jessica asked, though her heart was already racing because she could guess. "Home," Yates said, looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Not a place, but a person. Someone who makes everywhere feel right. Someone who makes me want to stop wandering and start building." "Yates," Jessica whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "I love you, Jessica," he said, the words coming out rough but sure. "I know it has only been 2 months, but I love you. I think I started loving you the moment I saw you standing under that oak tree, refusing to let them break you." Jessica's tears spilled over. "I love you too," she said. "I did not think I could, not so fast, but I do. You make me feel safe in a way I have never felt before. You make me feel seen." Yates pulled her close, and they held each other as the Texas twilight deepened around them. When he finally kissed her, it was gentle and reverent, a promise of everything he felt. Jessica kissed him back, pouring 2 months of growing love and trust into the gesture. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "Marry me," Yates said suddenly. "I know we should probably wait longer, do things properly, but I do not want to wait. I want to build a life with you starting now." "Yes," Jessica said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They told Thomas that evening. He looked surprised but not displeased. "That was fast," he observed. "When you know," Yates said, his arm around Jessica's waist. Thomas studied them both, then nodded slowly. "Mary and I knew within a week," he admitted. "We waited 6 months to satisfy her parents, but we knew. I can see it in how you look at each other. You have my blessing." The children were thrilled, especially Alina, who immediately started calling Jessica Mama, despite Jessica's gentle corrections. "You can call me that if you want," Jessica finally told the little girl. "I would be honored." They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony in the nearest town, with Thomas standing as witness, and the children in their best clothes that Jessica had carefully mended and altered. Jessica wore a simple blue dress she had made herself, and Yates wore his cleanest shirt and looked at her like she was the sun and moon combined. The local preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and when Yates kissed his bride, the children cheered and Thomas smiled, the first real smile Jessica had seen from him since she arrived. They spent their wedding night in the small house Thomas had helped Yates build on the far edge of Sullivan property, a place of their own where they could start their married life. It was modest but sturdy, with 2 rooms and a porch that overlooked grazing land. Yates carried Jessica over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the middle of their new home. "It is not much yet," Yates said, "but we will make it ours." "It is perfect," Jessica said, meaning it. She had gone from nearly dying alone and friendless to married and loved in just 3 months. The speed of it all should have terrified her, but instead it felt right, like every hard thing in her life had been leading her to this moment. That night, as they lay together in their new bed, Jessica traced the scars on Yates's chest from years of hard living. "Tell me I am not dreaming," she whispered. "You are not dreaming. Yates assured her, pulling her closer. "This is real. We are real." "I never thought I could be this happy," Jessica admitted. "After my father died, after Del Rio, I thought maybe happiness was not meant for me." "You deserve all the happiness in the world," Yates said fiercely, "and I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you have it." They made love that night with a tenderness that brought tears to Jessica's eyes, and afterward she fell asleep in her husband's arms, feeling safer and more content than she ever had in her life. The next months brought their own challenges. Building a life together was not always easy. Yates and Thomas started breeding horses in addition to running cattle, hoping to make the ranch more profitable. Jessica continued helping with the main house while also managing her own, a juggling act that left her exhausted most evenings. But through it all, their love remained steady and strong. When winter came, bringing cold winds and occasional snow to the Texas plains, Jessica discovered she was pregnant. She told Yates on a December evening as they sat by their fire, nervous about how he would react to such early news in their marriage. His response was to sweep her into his arms and spin her around, laughing with pure joy. "A baby," he said, setting her down carefully as if she were suddenly made of glass. "We are going to have a baby." "You are happy?" Jessica asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Happy." Yates cupped her face in his hands. "Jessica, I am beyond happy. I am blessed. A life with you, a child on the way, a home of our own. I never dared dream of having all this." Their son was born the following July on a sweltering afternoon in 1883, arriving with a lusty cry that announced his displeasure at being evicted from his comfortable position. They named him James, and he had his mother's auburn hair and his father's blue eyes. Yates held his son for the first time with tears streaming down his weathered face, overwhelmed by the fierce love he felt for this tiny person. "He is perfect," Yates whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you for giving me this." Jessica, exhausted but glowing with happiness, smiled up at her husband. "Thank you for saving my life that day in Del Rio, for seeing me when no one else would." "Best decision I ever made," Yates said, carefully placing their son in her arms. "Stopping in that town, insisting on the truth. It brought me you, and you brought me everything I did not even know I needed." Life settled into a rhythm after James was born. The horse breeding operation began showing real promise, with buyers coming from as far as New Mexico to purchase Sullivan horses. Jessica juggled motherhood with her sewing business, which had grown as word spread about her skill with a needle. The children from the main house remained regular fixtures in their lives, with Alina especially devoted to helping with baby James. Thomas, who had been distant and sad when Jessica first arrived, slowly began to heal. He never stopped missing Mary, but the presence of life and laughter on the ranch again seemed to ease the sharpest edges of his grief. Jessica sometimes caught him watching Yates and her with something like wistfulness, and she hoped he might find love again someday. When James was 2 years old, Jessica gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Rose. She arrived on a spring morning when the wildflowers were in full bloom, a tiny creature with delicate features and her father's stubborn chin. Yates declared her the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, after her mother of course, and proceeded to spoil her absolutely. "You are going to ruin her," Jessica said with amusement, watching Yates rock their daughter while making silly faces to coax out smiles. "That is my job as her father," Yates replied, unrepentant. "Boys you teach to be strong. Girls you teach that they deserve the world. And if we have more boys, then I will teach them to treat women the way women deserve to be treated," Yates said. "With respect and love and the recognition that they are equals in every way that matters." Jessica felt her heart swell with love for this man who had started as her rescuer and become her partner in the truest sense. They made decisions together, raised their children together, built their life side by side rather than him leading and her following. As the years passed, the ranch prospered. Thomas eventually remarried, a widow named Catherine who brought her own 2 children into the family and blended them with Thomas's with surprising ease. The Sullivan land became known for quality horses and good cattle, a reputation that brought steady income and respect. Jessica's sewing business grew beyond simple mending. She began designing and creating dresses for women throughout the territory, her skill and artistic eye making her sought after. She hired 2 young women to help with the simpler work, training them in the craft while managing the more complex projects herself. The extra income allowed them to expand their house, adding rooms for their growing family. Their 3rd child, another boy they named Thomas after his uncle, arrived when James was 5 and Rose was 3. Thomas Jr. had his mother's green eyes and a mischievous streak that kept his parents on their toes. Yates joked that they were outnumbered now, 3 children to 2 adults, but his smile as he said it showed how much he loved every chaotic moment. On a warm evening in the summer of 1889, 7 years after their first meeting in Del Rio, Yates and Jessica sat on the porch of their expanded home watching their children play in the yard. James was teaching Rose how to skip stones in a bucket of water while young Thomas toddled around trying to catch fireflies. "You ever think about that day?" Jessica asked quietly. "The day we met, all the time," Yates admitted. "I think about how close I came to riding right through Del Rio without stopping. How different everything would be if I had." Jessica shuddered slightly. "I would have died, and I would have missed out on the love of my life," Yates said, taking her hand. "On all of this." He gestured to the scene before them, their home, their children, the life they had built together. "You ever regret it?" Jessica asked. "Stopping your wandering, settling down so young?" Yates turned to look at her fully, his blue eyes serious. "Not for 1 second. You were what I was searching for all along, Jessica. Home was not a place I needed to find. It was you. It has always been you." Jessica leaned her head on his shoulder, watching their children play as the sun set in brilliant oranges and purples over the Texas plains. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too," Yates replied. "Every day, more than the day before." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell and Catherine called from the main house that supper was ready. The children ran ahead, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Yates and Jessica followed more slowly, hand in hand, in no hurry to end the perfect moment. Life continued its forward march. James grew tall and strong, showing his father's love of horses and his mother's keen intelligence. By the time he was 14, he was helping train colts and showing remarkable skill. Rose became a reader, devouring every book she could get her hands on and dreaming of becoming a teacher. Young Thomas proved to be a natural businessman, even at a young age, with an ability to calculate figures in his head that amazed everyone. In 1892, Jessica gave birth to their 4th and final child, a daughter they named Grace. She arrived unexpectedly during a spring thunderstorm, making her entrance into the world as dramatic as her personality would prove to be. Yates, now 40 years old and a father of 4, held his youngest daughter and marveled at how full his life had become. "4 children," he said to Jessica as she recovered from the birth. "We have made quite a family." "We have," Jessica agreed, tired but happy. "A beautiful, chaotic, perfect family." The 1890s brought changes to Texas and the West. The truly wild days were fading, replaced by increasing settlement and civilization. Towns grew larger, law became more established, and the frontier gradually pushed further into memory than reality. But on Sullivan land, life remained grounded in the same values it always had: hard work, family loyalty, and the kind of love that weathers all storms. Jessica never forgot how close she had come to losing everything that day in Del Rio. Sometimes, in quiet moments, she would remember standing under that oak tree with a noose hanging above her, certain she was about to die. Then she would look around at her life, her husband, her children, her home, and feel overwhelmed with gratitude for the cowboy who had believed in her innocence when no one else would. Yates, for his part, never regretted the decision to stop in Del Rio that summer day in 1882. He had been drifting, searching for something he could not name, and found it in the eyes of a woman facing death with courage and dignity. She had given him purpose, love, and a reason to finally put down roots. On their 15th wedding anniversary in 1898, Yates surprised Jessica with a trip back to Del Rio. She had not returned since the day they left together, and she approached the town with mixed feelings. So much had changed. The old oak tree where she had nearly died was still there, but the town around it had grown. The bank had closed after Charles Whitmore's conviction, replaced by a larger establishment with a respectable manager. Many of the people who had called for her blood were gone, moved on to other towns, or passed away. They visited briefly, not staying long, but Jessica needed to face the place that had almost destroyed her. Standing in the town square with Yates beside her and 15 years of happy marriage behind her, she finally made peace with that terrified young woman she had been. "I forgive them," she told Yates as they prepared to leave. "The people who wanted to see me hang. They were afraid and I was convenient. I understand that now in a way I could not then." "You are remarkable," Yates said, pulling her close. "Your capacity for forgiveness and grace continues to amaze me." "I learned from the best," Jessica replied, kissing him softly. "You taught me that people are capable of goodness, even when everything seems dark. You showed me that." They returned to the ranch and their children, their brief visit to the past only reinforcing how blessed their present was. James, now 17, had started courting a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property, and Jessica delighted in watching her eldest son navigate the awkward waters of young love. Rose, at 15, was teaching at the small schoolhouse near the ranch. Her dream of becoming a teacher realized even younger than she had hoped. Thomas Jr., 12 years old, kept detailed books of the ranch finances and had ideas for expansion that impressed even his uncle. And Grace, at 6 years old, was pure sunshine, spreading joy wherever she went. As the new century approached, Yates and Jessica looked back on nearly 2 decades together with wonder. They had started with nothing but each other, built from the ashes of Jessica's near execution and Yates's wandering life. Now they had a thriving ranch, successful children, and a love that had only deepened with time. "We should write it all down," Jessica said one evening. "Our story, I mean. So the children and grandchildren will know how it all started." "You mean the part where I dramatically saved you from hanging?" Yates teased. "I suppose I did cut quite the heroic figure." Jessica laughed and swatted his arm. "The part where you believed in me when no one else would. Where you saw past the accusations to the person underneath. That is the important part." "All right," Yates agreed. "We will write it down together. Every part, from the moment I rode into Del Rio to right now." They never did get around to writing it all down. Too busy living the story to document it. But they told it to their children, and their children told it to their children, and the story of how Yates Sullivan saved Jessica Turner's life and won her heart became family legend. James married his sweetheart and settled on a portion of Sullivan land his father and uncle gave him, raising his own children there. Rose married a teacher she met in a nearby town and continued teaching while raising a family. Thomas Jr. took over the business side of the ranch operation, his sharp mind for numbers making the Sullivan holdings more profitable than ever. Grace, true to form, kept everyone on their toes and eventually married a cowboy with her father's kind heart and her mother's strength. Yates and Jessica became grandparents, then great-grandparents, their love story the foundation upon which generations built their lives. They aged together gracefully, Yates's hair going silver and Jessica's developing the same, their hands becoming gnarled with age but still seeking each other's touch. On a warm spring day in 1920, Yates Sullivan died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 68, his wife of 38 years beside him. Jessica held his hand as he passed, whispering words of love and gratitude for the life they had shared. She mourned him deeply, but took comfort in knowing that theirs had been a love most people never experienced, a partnership of equals built on trust and respect and unwavering commitment. Jessica lived another 7 years, spending her final years surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren who all carried pieces of the love she and Yates had shared. She told their story often, making sure none of them forgot how it had all begun, with a false accusation, a cowboy's courage, and a love that defied all odds. When Jessica Turner Sullivan passed away in 1927 at the age of 68, she was buried beside her husband on Sullivan land, under a sky so vast and blue it seemed to stretch into eternity. Her tombstone bore a simple inscription chosen by her children: beloved wife, mother, and survivor. She was saved by a cowboy and loved by all. The Sullivan Ranch continued for generations, the family business growing and changing with the times, but always honoring the legacy of its founders. And in the hearts of every Sullivan descendant lived the knowledge that they owed their existence to a moment of courage on a July day in 1882. When a wandering cowboy named Yates decided that justice mattered more than convenience, and that the young woman standing under an oak tree deserved someone to believe in her innocence. It was a love story that began with a rescue and flourished into something beautiful and enduring, proving that sometimes the best things in life come when we least expect them, and that courage and compassion can change the course of not just one life, but generations to come.